Good evening, everyone. I'm Traci Vincent, and I'm an area manager, and I'm coming to you live from GTC. I see you here at GTC also, and for those of you who can make it, hopefully you're on the virtual starting tomorrow, so it's going to be great. Super excited to share with you a little bit tonight about some things that I've kind of learned along my journey. For those of you who don't know that I'm a physical therapist, I've been a PT for 30 years now.
Wow.
Time. And probably about 23 years ago, I kind of started trying to figure out, like, why weren't some people getting better, and what was this whole mind and body connection, and how did it all work together? So I started doing a lot of research, a lot of reading, and just kind of bringing in more of an integrated approach into how I was treating clients. And along the way, I was also digging deep into gut health and reading a lot of stuff from Doug Kaufman, Dr. Don Colbert, and just the whole thing about fungus link and all this stuff integrating together. And so that's sort of how I've come along this journey of just thinking about the importance of integrating medicine. And that's what I love so much about Arbonne. And it was through the 30-day healthy living program that I decided to jump into have an Arbonne business. So I just love the way that they were presenting that and integrating that into for people. So tonight I wanted to talk to you a little bit about avoiding the brain gut rut. So let me see how I'm supposed to share my screen. Here we go. All right, so hopefully you guys can see that. All right. So talking about avoiding the brain gut rut. So we all know people that are really struggling, especially these days. Everything from dementia and Alzheimer's. Maybe some of us, our parents are at that place, maybe our grandparents. But there's also the other side of the, thinking about our brain and how it's functioning and related to the gut. And we get into the whole anxiety and depression. So throughout, like, all segments of society, people are dealing with both of these things. So I just wanted to kind of give you a few insights tonight, just to help educate you, empower you, and equip you to help your clients just in a deeper way so that they can have more meaningful results out of the 30-day to healthy living and why it's so important, and just to equip you with things that you can help them to understand deeper the importance of getting the gut health in alignment to help their brain. So let's go ahead and get started here. All right, so why is brain reserve really important? So I wanted to thank also, before we get started, I wanted to thank Beth for inviting me to do this call for you guys. I gave this presentation a couple of months ago at the Arbonne home office at a nutrition workshop. And these were actually just my talking points, and Beth asked me to use them as the slide presentation. So why is brain reserve so important? So if you think about when we're born, we all are born with a certain level of brain reserve. And throughout our life, especially here in the United States with our, standard American diet, and kind of our lifestyle of being very hectic, busy, whatnot. So when we think about the brain reserve, we have this X amount when we're born with. And so as we're aging and, we sort of cross the line as the reserve starts to go down along with age, we hit a tipping point. And that is when we get into the trouble zone. So that's when we start getting into the whole thing about, brain fog, memory loss, can't concentrate, poor focus, all of that. So when our lives are, obviously very hectic, stressed out, not eating good at all, especially what most people are eating these days, fast food, processed food, all of that, that brain reserve curve becomes very steep. So we're going to cross that threshold line quickly. Your brain is involved in everything your body is doing. When your brain is working right, you actually work right too. It's the most complex organ in our body. And, for our physical health, your brain is important and critical. Something you may not realize is that 20% of your oxygen and blood flow go to the brain. So if you kind of break that down, if you think about your brain right here, it's only like 8 to 12 pounds out of your whole body weight, but yet 20% of the blood that's circulating around in your body is coming to this area to help it function. So, you know, that's why it's super important to get all of these things lined up, because we need to have good blood flow, you know, so that our brain works more properly. So what are some of the warning signs that our brains may be getting into trouble? If our memory is worse than it was 10 years ago, that's a sign. Low energy, you know, having your mood unstable and low, irritability, anxiety, stress, and worry. You know, just thinking about, you know, stress. When we're under a lot of stress, our body produces more cortisol, and that actually kills our brain cells. So that's why it's really important to think about, okay, exercise management, stress management, you know, eating right, and dialing all the key pieces together to optimize our health. A short attention span, you know, we talked about that earlier, about lack of concentration, brain fog, impulsive bad decisions, insomnia, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, weight issues, and sexual dysfunction. So all of these are signs, and maybe somebody doesn't have all the signs, but maybe they have 2 or 3. That's the time that they need to be thinking about. Okay.
I love you guys.
Everybody can mute their lines. Thank you. All right. So coming to the brain-gut connection. So our gut is in direct communication with our brain. So when you're, you know, a little embryo in your mama's tummy, right? So the cells, you know, obviously it starts out as a cell, and then it divides and it divides and it divides, and that forms the baby. So the cell, when it divides, one becomes the cells for the brain, and the other division of that becomes the cells that make up your digestive tract. So the information that's contained in those cells, they are in direct communication with each other because they come from the same, they split from the same cell. And as our body grows, through your nervous system, you have your vagus nerve that connects the brain directly to the digestive tract. So that's the reason why, like, if you're nervous, you get butterflies in your tummy. You know, your nervousness is coming from what's happening in your brain, but you're feeling it in your stomach. And another thing might be if you're, you know, upset and angry, you know, you may feel like, oh gosh, I'm going to have diarrhea or something. So that's the reason why those things are happening, even though they're in different parts of the body, because of that direct communication happening there. So anxiety, depression, and stress and grief express themselves emotionally with emotional pain through our brain, and then the GI distress. We already talked about that. So something to think about and consider is that there's 100 trillion microorganisms in your gut. That's 10 times the amount of cells that you have in your whole body. So understanding the effect of when these organisms are out of whack, the amount of power that they're going to have influencing the other cells is tremendous. So another reason why we need to get this control. And many people don't realize that ADD is an infection in brain to bacterial ADD. So oftentimes when we're working with clients, they may have children that have ADD and autism. And so it's important to, you know, be educated with them. Also, when you have beneficial gut flora, it helps carry the estrogen out of your body. Most female cancers are estrogen based. So when our gut is not working properly and there's a lot of buildup and, you know, slow movements in there, the estrogen is staying in our body a lot longer. So we want to actually that's another reason. So these are just all reasons why we want to have this dialed in. Food is our greatest danger for antibiotics. 70% of the antibiotics that are in the United States, they're there for livestock. We've all heard, don't take antibiotics because it affects your gut health. We've heard that, don't overprescribe. Doctors used to prescribe antibiotics for everything, and now they're being more resistant to that. But you have to remember that most of the antibiotics that are coming out of pharmaceutical companies are there for the animals that we're eating. So when you're eating those animals, you're taking in the antibiotics that they ingested. So that affects your gut health that way. So you may think, well, I'm not taking antibiotics, but understanding the importance of choosing clean meats that are free of antibiotics and hormones, that's the reason why it's important, because it's disrupting your digestive tract. I thought this was I learned this along the way, that your deficient gut flora early in life causes a decrease in serotonin, because you probably heard through the 30 Days of Healthy Living that most of your serotonin is produced in your gut. So this can come from anything from antibiotics, childhood trauma, parents divorcing, and even death of a parent. So that those stresses onto the digestive tract have lasting impacts on the children. All right, so coming back to talking about Alzheimer's and dementia, this is kind of running rampant. Like, you turn on the nightly news and every other commercial is, Alzheimer's medication. They're talking about that. I have a friend who, her father is dealing with this right now, and, he can't drive anymore because he can't remember how to get home. And it's a lot of families, this is becoming a huge issue. When 100 years ago, this wasn't an issue. And it's all coming back to related to what types of foods that we're eating and the gut being imbalanced. In the next 25 years, the rate of Alzheimer's is expected to triple. So this is huge, huge, huge. And we can be a powerful piece in helping people redirect this from being what their story is. Alzheimer's is now known as type 3 diabetes. So this is important for people to know. I mean, most people think, oh, I'm going to get old, I'm just naturally going to get that. That's not true. The damage to your brain in Alzheimer's patients, the damage actually begins to form 20 to 30 years before you ever have a single symptom of dementia. So again, another reason why what we teach and coach and integrate into help people's lives and their families needs to happen way before they ever get to their senior years. It needs to be much earlier so that all these things can be preventable. Some of the things that if you may be at risk for Alzheimer's, if you have a family member with it. So there is a genetic component, and you can be tested for that. You can get a genetic test, which is called the ApoE4 test. So you can find out if that is something that you have in your genetic marker. So just kind of pausing here on the genetics, just because it's in your genes doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be activated. There's kind of a newer field of science called epigenetics, that it's understanding that just because we have a gene for something, it's the environmental factors that activate and turn on that gene. So we can keep that gene turned off by having keeping our environmental toxins down, keeping our gut clean, all of that. So we have control over so much of what's happening in our life. And just because we have a genetic tendency for something doesn't necessarily mean we're ever going to have that. Something else to think about, if you've ever had a history of a head injury, heart disease, strokes, or diabetes, cancer, depression, all of that, that can affect how the brain is affected later on into the later years. If you're suffering from depression that's not being managed, that doubles your risk, if you're a woman, for getting Alzheimer's and dementia. For men, it actually quadruples. So another factor that may put you at risk is if you're exercising less than twice a week. Also, engaging in regular learning, that's really important. So if you're not doing those things, those are all things that leave your brain at risk. And finally, if you do not regulate your blood sugar, this is a huge one. And again, these are all things that we coach on the 30-day healthy living program, of the importance of balancing the blood sugar and how that helps our bodies decrease inflammation and get back in sync. With the blood sugar spikes, it ends up causing brittle blood vessels. And so you have a buildup of beta amyloid plaques in the brain. What's called tau proteins also build up. And again, going back to if 20% of our blood flow is going for our brain and we have brittle blood vessels, you can see, again, crossing the threshold, recipe for disaster. So before we move on to sleep, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about our memory and the importance of thinking about our blood flow. If you're thinking about blood flow, you also want to be thinking about water, because most of our blood is water. So drinking a lot of water is very, very important. Not just for staying hydrated, it's also important for brain function. Something that you may be wanting to talk to your clients about is making sure that they're drinking at least half of their body weight in ounces of water every day. I run into people all the time that like, I drink coffee, I drink soda, but they drink very little water. So it's just helping them to, get that water piece right. Also important with blood flow is exercise. We want to be exercising at least 3 to 4 times a week for about 45 minutes. So if you're thinking, well, I don't go to the gym, what am I going to do? I can't go exercise. Well, just taking a walk for 45 minutes, like you're walking like you're late for something, that's totally adequate for what you need to get your blood circulating into the brain better. Thinking about inflammation, we've kind of touched on this a little bit already. We want to make sure that we're treating the leaky gut. And that's what, our 30-day healthy living program is obviously designed to help that. Taking omega-3s is really, really important for the brain and for your gut health. Also increasing your folate, and folate is found in dark green leafy vegetables, B6 and B12. And so we already know that our fizz sticks, they're loaded with those, our vitamin packs, power packs, all of that. So all these things integrated together. The last thing I want to touch on as far as memory is thinking about toxins. Toxins can be anything from pesticides, molds, heavy metals, BPS, parabens, PEGs, phthalates. And this is where Arbonne has already been way ahead of the game for 38 years now, of thinking of taking all those things out of our products and being clean. So we really have the best of both worlds here, where we're thinking about our clean products and we're thinking about our 30-day healthy living program. So super, super powerful. So moving on to sleep. Again, we already talked about the blood flow to the brain and the importance of sleep, right? So how many hours is adequate? So it needs to be, what I've read from the studies that show that 7 to 8 hours is adequate. And the reason why you need to have that amount of sleep is because your brain does the rinsing of the toxins during deep sleep. If you're sleeping more than 9 hours, then that's typically a sign that there's some imbalance in your gut, because it's like dysregulating your hormones and things like that. I've talked to people that they say, well, I take a sleeping pill and that's how I go to sleep. And they kind of get used to that system of that. Most sleeping medications are very addictive, one, and also with most sleeping medications, prescription medications, it causes your to only go to a certain level of sleep. So if you think about, you have to get to the deepest level of sleep for the rinsing of the toxins to occur. So with sleeping medications, it takes you to, let's say if it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it maybe takes you to level 3, and it kind of holds your sleep at that level. So you never get down into the rinsing cycle of getting the toxins out of the brain, because the next day, your environment and all that is going to reload your brain up with toxins again. So that's really important of understanding the power of that. And again, we have our sleep spray, which helps people get off of sleeping medications and do something that's more of a natural based thing. If you or your partner find that there's a lot of snoring, sleep apnea type things going on at night, that disrupts your sleep. It's important to get tested. There's sleep studies that you can do to find out if you have sleep apnea. So if you're having sleep apnea, that means that there's a lack of oxygen heading up to the brain while you're asleep. So again, that obviously is going to affect the output of your brain. Something important to be thinking about is avoiding electronic devices. We all love the whole smartphone thing, right? And we've sort of become addicted to them, because we're constantly on social media and checking our emails and text messages and, all that. So it's kind of a good, I don't know what you want to say, sleep hygiene habits to get into would be an hour before bed, putting the electronic devices aside, because it allows your brain to kind of wind down and not be just kind of frenetic with what's happening there. Also using a blue screen helps the rays out that are coming out of your laptop, your iPads, and cell phones. You can also use night settings on your cell phone, which takes the blue light down as well. The other thing is keeping your phone and iPad away from your pillow, your nightstand, just basically keeping it out of your bedroom at night while you're sleeping. And I've even heard some studies that suggest turning off your Wi-Fi at night because of all of the electromagnetic influence that it's having on our brain, when our brain should be resting, cleansing itself, and as we're sleeping. Another talking point to just kind of discuss rather quickly here is circadian rhythms. This is sort of kind of offshoot here, but I just thought it was really interesting that every organ in your body, circadian rhythms, for those of you who don't know really what that is, it's like our body, we have like certain cycles that our body goes through every day, kind of a sleep and wake cycle. And every organ in our body has its own circadian rhythm. And for our pancreas, for example, our pancreas, that's where our insulin comes from to decrease our blood sugar, get us back into balance. For our pancreas, it has its own rhythm. So at nighttime, it doesn't produce as much insulin as it does during the daytime. So people that are eating heavy meals at night, that's why they have trouble getting the insulin back down to be at a stable level. So they'll have a tendency to put on more weight, and have more of a tendency to have insulin resistance. So that's something you want to be thinking about when you're coaching with your clients, is helping them to understand at least a 12-hour fasting cycle every day. So it should be about 12 to 14 hours of the intermittent fasting to really help balance our hormones, balance out these rhythms that are happening in our bodies. Also, you may not be aware that melatonin is also produced in the gut. So another reason why we need to get all of this in line together. Melatonin is something many people take as a sleep aid to help them feel relaxed and go to sleep. So when their gut is healthier, they produce more melatonin on their own because it's something our body already makes. So it's always better to let your body do what it does best and keep healthy that way. So let's talk about, we've kind of spent a lot of time talking about depression and, dementia and Alzheimer, but let's also talk about another segment that a lot of people are dealing with, which is depression. And this is affecting children, teens, adults, you name it. It's becoming an issue. I mean, we've had so many issues with, incidents happening at schools. Obviously the mental health is something we really need to get keyed in and dialed in of, how can we improve all this? So depression, most of your neurotransmitters, which is what your brain uses to function, are actually produced in your gut. I mean, we've already discussed serotonin. Most people are pretty familiar with serotonin, but it's also dopamine, GABA, norepinephrine. All of these things are manufactured in the gut. So understanding that having your gut health, lined up properly is super critical. 1 in 3 Americans are struggling with depression. And it's sort of one of those untalked about things. Many people, just because of, just kind of our pride and ego, we don't talk about those things. We can talk about having a physical injury, but to say that we have something mentally, it just doesn't feel right and seem right. So a lot of people are kind of suffering in silence. And actually 20% of teens are suffering with depression right now. And only 7% are having treatment right now. So it's a big, big gap. And obviously most teens are eating a lot of junk food, a lot of processed food, lots of sports drinks and sodas. So, it's not a coincidence that these are the things that are happening. It's also important to remember that depression is not a diagnosis. It's simply a symptom. So, antidepressants are not a cure for depression. They simply just mask the symptoms of depressions. The clinical studies show antidepressants versus exercise have equal results at 4 weeks. And at 10 months, exercise far exceeds the value of medications. I was just actually talking to my dad yesterday, and he was, shared with me that his primary care physician had prescribed him these things, and I said, well, Dad, do you think you need this? And he said, well, no, I feel pretty good. And he's like, I've been going to the gym, I've been exercising. And I said, well, when did your doctor prescribe this? And he said, well, before I started exercising. But the doctor keeps renewing this prescription. And my dad didn't realize that the exercise was benefiting more than this prescription. So that's what I'm saying. People just don't know. And a lot of doctors don't know this, even though it's in the research, for whatever reason, they're just not familiar with that. I think it's important to always, when you're thinking about depression, anxiety, of addressing it as a 4-quadrant issue. So thinking about what is the biology that's happening in the person's body. Obviously the psychological issues, and understanding what are some coping mechanisms, what are some things that we could turn around those negative thoughts that we may be lingering on. Also important about thinking about the social situation. Keeping them connected in community. And that's what I love about Arbonne and, our programs and our groups, and that it's a community thing, keeping people engaged. And it's really, really important in how our brains are functioning healthy. And also thinking about the spiritual quadrant. And spiritual, is more, it's about what is your purpose and why are we here, and getting people connected to that they feel like there's some value to them, because we all have value in this world, and people, getting them recognizing that. So the biggest factor that's under your control to influence, any issues with risk of depression is definitely on what you eat. And we've kind of gone over that over and over again tonight. It's super important. Most Americans, about 99% of Americans actually, are deficient in omega-3s. And so omega-3s, we can get that from eating clean fish, that's like wild caught fish. Obviously, you can supplement with omega-3s. Really, really important. In the standard American diet, people are very high in omega-6s and very low in omega-3s. So it really needs to be like a 1-to-1 ratio, but most Americans are 20-to-1. So it's really off kilter. So this is really affecting what's happening. Vitamin D is another big one that most people, about 2/3 of people, are deficient in. So if you are wondering, well, what level I'm at, the next time you're getting your blood work done, have them test that. And so you want to be optimizing yourself in the 50 to 80 range. Typically, most people are in the 20s and 30s, so you need to bump that up. You can do vitamin D supplements. You can also just get out in the sun and sit out there for about 15 minutes a day, without sunscreen, so that it can actually absorb. And that also, with the vitamin D, that helps, with your protein synthesis. It helps with a lot of different things. So what are a few takeaways just to wrap this up? There's many, many ways to optimize your brain and your brain health. So just, I just encourage you all to just start with 2 or 3 things that you learned and implement those right away. You can create a healthy life by caring for and just, loving and focusing on what you love about your life. We all benefit from brain healthy families, businesses, and communities. So just a few things to remember: water, right? Making sure you're drinking a lot of water every day. Proper sleep, super key. Exercise, your omega-3s and vitamin D, and eating real food. I like to say 8 is great. So that means, 5 to 6 vegetables every day and maybe 2 to 3 fruits. We have a tendency to go heavy on the fruits and not so much on the vegetables. We want it to be, heavy on the vegetables. As we coach, at least 50 to 70% of your plate should be vegetables every time you eat. Some of my favorite quotes, Hippocrates, right? Our father of medicine, right? Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. So super key. That's always the key to optimizing your health and optimizing your gut and brain health. And also be the change you want to see in the world. So I just encourage all of you, if you're consultants, to really take these things to heart and, getting yourself as healthy as you can be, because when your brain is better, you're going to be functioning better. You show up better in your family, you show up better for your business, and you just show up better for the community and making an impact in this world. So thank you all for taking a little bit of time out tonight. And if you have any questions, just let me know. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. And for those of you at GTC, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow when we get started. All right. Thank you again. Have a good night. Bye-bye.